Hello, welcome to ONTIC's Connected Intelligence Podcast. I'm Fred Burton, ONTIC's Executive Director of Protective Intelligence. This podcast offers valuable insights and practical advice to help you navigate the complexities of modern corporate security shared by leaders and innovators in the field. Now, on to the discussion. Hi, I'm Fred Burton, here today with Jeremy Baumann. Jeremy is the CEO and founder of Corporate Security Advisors. Jeremy is a decisive, results-driven security executive with 30 years of experience spanning corporate security, management consulting, and law enforcement. He has led and transformed enterprise security programs across healthcare, financial services, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, retail, and technology, positioning security as a strategic business enabler. His leadership includes serving as an interim chief security officer at Health Partners, leading enterprise security at Discover Financial Services, and building global security programs at Takeda Pharmaceuticals. Jeremy now serves as the CEO and founder of Corporate Security Advisors and is a CPP certified security leader with deep expertise in building high-performing teams, modern security programs, and enterprise-aligned strategies. Jeremy, welcome to the ONTIC Connected Intelligence Podcast.
Fred, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast with you.
Oh my goodness, it's our pleasure. Your organization does tremendous work. How the heck did you get in this business?
Well, I tell you, it was completely by accident. Started out, I was a restless student and in school, graduated high school and college early, and was stumbling around at 20 years old, still trying to finish up my master's degree when a local police department called and said I'd come up to the top of the list. So I'd go on to spend the next 5 years chasing bad guys through the cornfields in central Illinois, as I like to say, before I turned around at the age of 26 and was starting to reevaluate like what I was going to do next in my career. And actually had a mentor of mine who was an FBI National Academy grad steer me towards corporate security. There was a account manager opening for a company called Guardsmark. And Guardsmark provided all of the security for Caterpillar at the time. And I actually went in and interviewed for that role on his recommendation because Weldon Kennedy, former deputy director of the FBI, worked for Guardsmark. And my mentor told me that if it was good enough for Weldon Kennedy, it was probably good enough for me. I was so impressed with what was going on in corporate security at Caterpillar. The officers there were doing all of the firefighting, all of the fire systems maintenance, confined space rescue, hazmat. And so I was completely blown away by the world of corporate security. Had no idea it existed prior to that interview. And that really is what launched my career in the corporate security space. From there, I'd go on to spend 5 more years with Guardsmark and move through a range of companies throughout my career.
Yeah, that's a fabulous company, and my goodness, what a career. You've had a rare combination of career chapters: law enforcement, street cop, global pharmaceuticals, financial services, healthcare, and now consulting. What through line connects all of these roles?
I would say the number one is building high performing teams. From the moment I started in corporate security, the opportunity was there to take our client accounts and make the performance of the security officers better. I got a reputation as a fixer, so I started getting sent from account to account to improve client satisfaction, improve the satisfaction of security officers, be able to hire and build the right teams. And so that followed throughout my career. As I went on into Takeda Pharmaceuticals, who was a previous client, I was asked to build a number of different teams there. And then finally at Discover Financial Services, the same thing. Jim McJunkin, former assistant director of counterterrorism for the FBI and ADIC at Washington Field Office, was hired to be the CSO. He very quickly got himself promoted to CISO and asked me to come across the street and build a security program there. Again, it was about building high-performing teams at Discover again. They had much more of a traditional security force that was focused on security force operations. They lacked things like intelligence. They were not thinking about risk mitigation at the time. Everything that they were doing very well. There was a lot of opportunity to add to those teams, to build on other high performing components. And really, that's been the through line through my entire career.
Jeremy, what motivated you to create corporate security advisors?
Yeah, so as I got into Discover, one of the things that I had very quickly found out was that we had a complete lacking of vendor contracts. And for anyone with experience in corporate security, you know there's a vast vendor landscape out there. And as corporate security leaders, we rely on many of those vendors for critical types of support that where we really don't need that expertise on a full-time basis. So as I looked at it, I had to onboard more than 80 different vendors in my first 18 months with Discover to be able to have the right support that we needed. Everything from critical support in Istanbul after the bombing in the souk, when I had an executive that needed to travel over there and we needed close protection support, to a whole range of intelligence vendors to be able to provide us with a clearer picture about the risk that we were going to encounter. And as I came out of my time at Discover, what I really realized were that there were a lot of operational vendors, but no vendors were really positioned to be able to provide strategic advisory services. And so, what I wanted to do was take my experience building high performing teams to be able to bring to market a group of individuals who could be that strategic management, consulting advisory service for corporate security to be able to help people build and rebuild high performing corporate security teams. And so that's really what we've spent the last 7 years doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. I know when I transitioned out of federal law enforcement and went into the private sector, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. That was a long time ago, but I could see how what you guys do is just critical to the business. When senior executives come to you for help, Jeremy, what problems are they really trying to solve?
Yeah, I'd say there's a probably three different areas there. Senior executives, when we're talking about C-suite executives, which makes up a lot of our clients, C-suite executives are coming to us because they're looking at their security programs and they want to ensure that the programs are high performing, business aligned, and that the organizations are doing everything they can to keep the organization safe. When CSOs, heads of security, come to us, those are low ego leaders who are truly desiring to have the best programs. They're open to having an outside analysis of their program, and they know that bringing in the brightest minds is really what it takes to find those areas where you can continue to improve. Even if you've got a good program, the best way to make it a great program is to bring in outside experts who can bring a fresh perspective and offer that insight. And I would say we also have senior executives come to us from vendor organizations who support corporate security programs and leaders internal to security departments who are trying to figure out how to get funding for their programs. You know, they may want an intelligence platform for their organization, and they're pretty sure that it's going to provide value, but they don't necessarily know how to make the right business case to get that funding from senior executive leadership. So they'll come to us, and we've got a 100% success record for getting funding for our clients. So that's a big part about what we do is helping get those successful business cases built and approved.
Yeah, that's an amazing stat. You often talk about positioning security as a business enabler. What does that practically look like inside an organization?
So that's a very in-depth analysis of your security program to try and look at it according to what is important to each specific company, each specific organization, and position your security efforts not as a barrier to simply slow the organization down in an effort to keep it safe, but how do we hit that Venn diagram? We get the overlap between keeping the organization safe and reducing friction in the environment so that we're actually helping the business perform better. In healthcare, we look at uh, security being able to significantly reduce clinical staff turnover. Depending on the specific business, if it's a supply chain heavy business, how do we ensure that goods can flow throughout the supply chain faster without barriers as they cross, international borders? For a financial services business, how do we look at making the organization more secure so that we're protecting the cyber environment from a physical perspective? And it requires examining really what's important for each business, what the culture of that business is, what the executive leaders expect out of the security organization, maybe helping set those expectations, and then framing the security program around the right level of risk mitigation, risk reduction that's demonstrable to those executive leaders. Because it's one thing to be able to show that risk reduction, it's an entirely different thing to make sure that the risk reduction is in line with what the executives are looking for.
Yeah, that's very sound advice. I want to switch gears for a second, Jeremy. You've built crisis management programs across multiple industries. What does a mature, crisis ready organization look like today?
I'd say there's really two components that we look for in a mature organization that's crisis ready. And first off is an intelligence led organization. When security as a practice is looking over the horizon so that security is doing everything it can to be able to inform the organization about the changing risk landscape, what to expect, and being able to do the best job it can to anticipate the risk situations that might be dealt with. And I would say the second half to that is being well practiced. Too many organizations believe that crisis management planning is having a book on a shelf that they can pull down and open up and it'll give them all the answers. And what we see in organizations like that is when the crisis truly happens, the executive committee abandons the plan, they get into working mode, they roll up their sleeves, and what you've got is the executive committee solving the problem when it's a true corporate crisis. And when you're well practiced at crisis management, the executive committee is used to using the tools and methods for crisis management. They're using the platforms. They're taking intelligence from the security organization. They're gathering information. They're using the means of communication that are out there for the security that the security organization has likely put in place, and they're used to operating in that type of framework to solve the problems. And that really makes the difference between an organization that can function when the entire corporate email system gets compromised and one whose crisis management plan was built without any thought of, well, what do we do if email goes down? What do we do if we can't get access to Teams? What do we do if we can't function in the way that we normally do every day?
We'll get back to the conversation in just a moment. But first, I wanted to let you all know that there's an easy way to stay informed about ONTIC's upcoming events and new resources. Subscribe to our monthly newsletter to get updates sent directly to your inbox. Join the 20,000 plus security professionals who are already receiving these insights and sign up today. The link to subscribe is in the episode description. Continuity planning, especially after the new normal of the past few years, which appears to just be global chaos.
Yeah, so I think we're still seeing a lot of what I'd call paper tigers, right? There's a lot of documentation being created. And then just like we talked about with crisis management planning, when when a business continuity event happens, nobody's using those paper tigers, those written business continuity plans. So it's really important to have the business continuity planning process really be focused around those business critical functions and incorporated with the crisis management planning in a way that allows an organization to really see the through line to engaging that business continuity plan and being able to activate that business continuity plan when those critical vendors or systems or processes get compromised in a crisis.
How should organizations think about resilience as a cross functional capability rather than a reactive discipline?
Yeah, it's really all about preparedness. I think, in our view, when organizations are doing what they should for resilience on a cross-functional basis, they're thinking about loss of access to resources, thinking about loss of access to staff, loss of access to infrastructure, and putting the plans in place to make sure that they can continue to function if they have uh, those types of losses in a crisis management and a business continuity event. That's really what makes the difference between a resilient organization, um, and that goes for reputational impact as well. We work with a lot of organizations who, the corporate communications team is monitoring for reputational impact, but there's a lot of work that can be done by the security organizations with the right intelligence tools and 24-hour monitoring that allows the corporate communications team to get hours or days jump on reputational impact incidents as they come up. That difference in time, that ability to react faster, that ability to be able to have messages prepared ahead of time is really what makes the difference between a resilient organization that appears not to be impacted as deeply by a crisis or a continuity issue, and one that really takes a hit hard from lack of preparedness.
Jeremy, looking ahead as you go back in time and think about how you got here today and you forecast over the horizon, what skills will today's security leaders need to thrive in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I would say business, business, business. The As a security leader, you really have to view yourself as the interface between the executive leadership of your organization and your security programs. All of the security acumen in the world is fantastic, and you've got to have a baseline because you've got to be able to confidently stand in the executive suite and give the right advice or guidance when the CEO is being threatened or when there's an impending crisis that your organization is dealing with. But all of that gets lost if you can't understand how your program impacts the business. If you can't calibrate the amount of investment in your program to a true reduction in risk. The example we use is, more security is better, right? Well, not so much. If more security was better, each of us would have a 24-hour armed guard around our homes. None of us do that, right? Unless the risk specifically calls for that, the risk and the impact. And so it's a great example that we use to say, well, nobody would do that as just a layperson because that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars a year, and you'd be bankrupt in about 5 months. So we don't, even though more protection is better, what's the right level of protection given the business environment? And so we help organizations think about that in a reevaluation of each of their program and setting up those success metrics. The best example of that I can give in short order, we had a background investigations program at one of the organizations that I used to work at. And when we went back and did an analysis on that program, the way that the screening was set up, we had failed less than half of 1% of all the candidates that came through over a previous 12-month period. Well, we were able to very quickly look at that and say, the candidates that would have gotten through in the screening that we were allowed to do is not worth the level of investment that we were making in that program. The time of full time employees to manage that program, the vendor expense that we were paying, the per unit cost of the background investigations to have those done. And at the end of the day, we took the money for that program and we reallocated that towards a higher risk program where we could actually show a return on security investment. And so we were able to take that amount of money, point it at a supply chain security program, and that next year we saved 10 times the level of investment that we had in that program. And that's really what security leaders who have the business acumen to be able to look at their programs, to be able to take a fresh look each year and say, are these programs meeting the success metrics from a business perspective that we set forward? You can look at that same program and say, well, we didn't have anybody get through. But when you look at it a different way and say, for each instance that we kept out, it cost us $70,000. And had those gotten through, it wouldn't have been a $70,000 impact incident. So really thinking about it from that lens of business overall. How do we look at our programs? How do we align them to our business so that we're working in financially constrained environments? We're being good stewards of the resources that we're given. That's really what makes us a critical part of the C-suite and endears us to the other executives who are out there trying to accomplish business goals within an organization.
Jeremy, as you look back over your career and you've got a young security officer out that's watching this interview and discussion, what advice would you give that person that wants to be a CSO today?
Uh, Learn how to say yes. And I mean that in a couple of different regards. I think one of the great opportunities that I was afforded in my career, um, and it wasn't anything that happened by design, but when people came to me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to go to Mexico and stand up a security program down there?" In 2008, when the narco trafficking violence is off the hook, I said yes. I spoke a little bit of Spanish. I thought, you know, let's go down and give it a shot. When they came to me and they said, "Hey, we have to build a supply chain security program, and nobody here knows what that is, but we've got to get it done. Would you be willing to try this?" I said yes. Each of those, and I can cite all sorts of examples, each of those became a critical part of my process of learning, my ability. And many of those, Fred, came at times where I had to do that as sort of a second job on the side. When they came to me and asked me to build a security program for Mexico, I was working as an investigator for a pharmaceutical company. So it was going to be, yeah, you still have your caseload. You still got to clear all these cases. Um, but you're also going to be going down to Mexico, meeting with the RSO, meeting with the LEGAT, setting up the security program, hiring all the vendors. And so it can be many times like carrying two full-time jobs. But if you say yes, that's that experience, those opportunities are what allow you to look back on a career and say, wow, I was afforded the opportunity to do so many different things. And I would say the other part about saying yes is when you're a security leader and organizations come to you and they say, we really need to be able to get this done. You have a choice between saying, no, that's too dangerous, or yes, we can help you get that done. Here's how. And there's a lot more success found in supporting an organization, a lot more success found in being a trusted and respected security leader in an organization if you can find your way to yes. So that'd be my advice to that young security officer. No matter what the assignment is, no matter what your level is, learn to say yes. Take that as an opportunity. Learn to find ways to say yes to your customers, clients, whether they're internal or external, and you'll have a great career when you turn around and look back on it.
Very prudent advice. Now, Jeremy, as we close up here, and I'm not putting you on the spot here, we ask every guest this question: what does connected intelligence mean to you?
To me, connected intelligence is absolutely a cornerstone of a modern security program. What it means to me is that I have all of the intelligence sources pulled in, being synthesized, and looking at that information to be able to guide my organization. And we use intelligence with a very, very simple analogy. None of us would ever drive home at night, especially not down a windy mountain road, without headlights on. Intelligence is our headlights. That's what allows us to see the hazards in the road. It doesn't mean that it's going to allow us to see every hazard, but we would never drive home without our headlights on. Intelligence is the vehicle by which we see what's coming at us and our organizations, and we do the best that we can to prepare for that. And connected intelligence means that we're putting all of those disparate sources together to connect and provide new data that each of those sources wouldn't have given us individually. Data creating the synthesis of data, creating new data, very simply put. and it's absolutely critical to a program today.
Oh, I love that. I love that explanation. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for being on the OnTIC Connected Intelligence podcast.
Fred, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And please do say hello to my old friend, Ken Sensor.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll be meeting with him later today. I'll give him your regards.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for listening in. To find more episodes, visit us at ontic.co/podcasts. Don't forget to rate and subscribe on your streaming platform of choice. Know someone who would be a great podcast guest? Or have questions you'd like us to answer? Email us at podcast@ontic.co. This episode was produced by AJ McKeon, and I'm Fred Burton. Thanks for listening.